Welcome to today's Explainer, everyone. We're diving straight into a massive and honestly kind of invisible gap in the automotive industry today. We're talking about a fundamental tension that can literally make or break billions of dollars in research and development. So, let's unpack this strategic disconnect between designing for the everyday driver and actually selling to corporate institutions. Here is our roadmap for this breakdown. First, the ultimate strategic disconnect. Second, a tale of two worlds. Third, the real decision makers. Fourth, the threat of stalled tech. And finally, we'll wrap up with 3 product strategy frameworks. All right, part 1, the ultimate strategic disconnect, or the gap in automotive strategy. Look, right now, the whole industry is intensely focused on pushing the boundaries of software-defined vehicles, right? But here's the catch. In this massive rush to innovate, designing solely for the end driver completely misses the mark. Whether your team is building integrated powertrains or, the next generation of infotainment systems, it's super natural to picture the everyday driver behind the wheel. But engineering these massive technological leaps just for them, it's a fundamental strategic flaw. Why? Because the person driving the vehicle and the entity actually buying the vehicle are increasingly not the same. Which brings us to part 2, a tale of two worlds, users versus buyers. So these two groups are pretty much living in entirely different realities. On one side, you have the end consumer. They're totally driven by feature desires and user experience. They want the flashy interface, the AR heads-up display, basically that feeling of driving a spaceship. But on the flip side, the institutional buyer operates in a cold, hard world of strict commercial priorities and corporate risk metrics. Let's be real, they couldn't care less about customizable ambient cabin lighting. They're looking at return on investment spreadsheets and total cost of ownership. If we only design for the consumer, we completely alienate the buyer. It's like building a giant puzzle, but ignoring half the pieces. Moving to part 3, the real decision makers. So who actually holds the purse strings? Well, here are your real institutional stakeholders. We're looking at fleet managers, Tier 1 procurement boards, and OEM platform strategists. These are the folks with the actual purchasing power. When they evaluate new mobility tech, I promise you, they aren't getting swept up in the romance of a sleek design. Not at all. They're analyzing uptime, API access for predictive maintenance, service intervals, and just the overall long-term viability of the tech. Just listen to the vocabulary used by these boards. They need to, quote, guarantee bankability and operational efficiency. Bankability, that is the key word. Can they take this technology to the bank? Does it make financial sense at scale? If your incredible software-defined vehicle doesn't clearly demonstrate operational efficiency, well, the procurement board is just going to pass on it, no matter how mind-blowing that user experience might be. Part 4, the threat of stalled tech. What happens when innovation fails to launch? It's a really harsh reality, but even the most innovative, groundbreaking vehicle technology will absolutely stall in the market if it doesn't align with what these institutions actually need. Think about the tragedy of that sunk cost for a second. An engineering team could literally spend half a decade developing world-class, over-the-air update capabilities, right? But if they fail to align that roadmap with the operational demands of a fleet manager, that brilliant, cutting-edge technology just sits on a shelf gathering dust. The ROI simply has to be there to justify the purchase. I want to pause here for a second, and I want to ask all the automotive engineers and product leaders joining this explainer directly. How do you balance the feature desires of the end consumer against the strict commercial and reliability demands of corporate or fleet decision makers? It is literally a billion-dollar question. You can't ignore the user, for sure, but you absolutely cannot ignore the buyer. So how do we bridge this gap? That leads us to part 5, 3 product strategy frameworks for actionable alignment. All right, here's how we actually pivot from the problem to execution. Step 1, you have to deliberately balance user experience features with commercial priorities. Basically, every single proposed consumer feature must be cross-examined against its institutional viability. Step 2, adapt your software-defined development to satisfy corporate risk metrics. Your software has got to provide the raw data, the reliability, and the security that puts a procurement board completely at ease. And step 3, systematically align your technical roadmaps to guarantee that bankability. Your long-term engineering goals must run parallel to fleet operational priorities. Executing these 3 steps, that's what ensures your innovation actually hits the road. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really critical thought to reflect on today. Is your technical roadmap truly aligned with the institutional buyers who guarantee its bankability? Take a hard look at your development strategies and honestly ask yourself who you're really designing for. If you aren't factoring in the fleet managers and the procurement boards, it's probably time to recalibrate. Thanks so much for joining me for this breakdown. Keep learning, keep innovating, and I'll catch you next time.